We will call our meeting from yesterday back into session. And we've already went through all this process at the beginning of yesterday's meeting, but because this is a very special day, June 6th, I think it might be appropriate again that perhaps we stand one more time and say the Pledge of Allegiance. To our veterans and to our country, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. So we are continuing our meeting from yesterday. And we're going to commence with our budget hearings for 2012-2013. We do have a CEO overview of the budget, recommended budget. We're going to do that along with then a report from the Deputy Assessor Recorder, Kathy Scott. We do have an item here. Ruben, do I want to go and just put this first in? Yeah. You know, we're going to conduct a public hearing. But I do know there's some people, at least one person individual, would like to speak during what they consider the open time, but it's not actually the open time, it will be during the public hearing. I'm going to give that person an opportunity to speak now, or anybody else who'd like to come up as well. So again, I invite anybody who wants to speak during this public comment period on this portion of it to be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Comments to be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the board. Pursuant to the Brown Act, action or board discussion cannot be taken on items not on the agenda, other than receive comments or if deemed necessary, refer to the appropriate follow-up. So I have Mr. Gary Cadd who wanted to speak at this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, staff, and members of the public. My name is Gary Cadd, and I'm before this body to talk about the Shasta County Accountability and Transparency, mainly concerning the Shasta County Board of Supervisors meetings and the Shasta County Planning Commission meetings. This includes any and all Board of Supervisors members conducted as an agency of the county or as board of directors. The people of Shasta County deserve access to meeting videos in the rural as well as the urban areas on a 24/7, 365 basis. The present system is not accountable and transparent and is definitely not citizen-friendly. Your present system, as noted on the last page of your meeting agendas, clearly states as follows. The Board of Supervisors meetings are televised and can be reviewed on Reading Community Access Channel TV, Channel 11, in Reading, Anderson, and Shasta Lake on Tuesday evenings at 8:30 and Wednesdays at 2:30 in the afternoon. The meetings are also televised on Windjammer Cable on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. These times and dates are not always adhered to, and if a citizen would like a copy of the video, they have to contact RCAC, make an appointment, pay $20 for the first disc and $7 for each additional disc. To the public, this is not accountable and transparent. There are a large number of companies that offer services such as the ones that the City of Reading use to present their meetings to their residents. Some of the features, indexing, real-time streaming, time stamping, storage, and other services are available at a competitive pricing schedule. I am certain county staff has been contacted by some of these companies that offer these services, as other community agencies other governmental agencies in the area are being contacted all the time. Or the staff can do an internet search to find the appropriate company to provide these services, and if not, I'm more than certain we the people would be happy to provide companies' names, websites, services, and pricings if need be. And the present system is not available to the people except for these 2 times that they're on Channel 11, and everybody, of course, does not have Channel 11 throughout the county of Shasta. So I would ask you folks, I know that you can't act on it today, and this is a budget hearing and actually a budget item, but this, in the process of my researching this, I know that some of the companies charge $25,000. There are also some other companies, especially that are used down in the Sacramento area, that are rather inexpensive, $3,000-4,000 to set up, and the monthly charges are not that much. So I would ask that you folks would look into making the meetings accountable and transparent to the people to where they can see them on their time schedule. The way it is now, sometimes they can't even get them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cap. I will just add that although our review of our meetings may not be convenient to everybody, certainly our meetings are open to the public and there is accountability and transparency. I will move on to item number 1, the CEO overview of our recommended budget. Mr. Lees.
I will defer to my boss. Oh, you want me to take this?
I'm going to start, and then following my remarks and at the conclusion of the public hearing, or whenever you prefer, then Mr. Lees can take it from there. So good afternoon, Chairman Modi and honorable members of the board, B.B. Palin, County Fiscal Chief. It's my pleasure to give you an overview of the recommended, the CEO's budget for fiscal year 2012-13. Before I get started, I would like to introduce the staff in the CAO's office who helped to put this budget together and worked very closely with the departments to bring this to you today. Those CAO analysts are Julie Hope. Stand, Julie, please. Elaine Grossman, Megan Dorney, and then Amy Pettis, a new member of our staff. Thanks. You know, we're going to be talking about a lot of numbers this afternoon, but for me, it's really all about people, and it's about the people that we serve and protect. And this budget is the vehicle that gives us the opportunity to do that. Our recommended budget totals $392 million. This represents an increase of $14.9 million, or 4% compared to last year's adopted budget. And the primary reasons for the increase are due to some capital projects. We have the large project, the juvenile rehabilitation facility. We have some remodel projects. And in addition to that, we've also recommended an increase to the contingency reserve because there was some uncertainty if we would need to hold additional elections during the year, which to date are not reimbursed by the state. So that was an increase from $5 million to $6 million. And it's pretty typical budget. As always, about 80% of our budget is really for programs that are state or federally funded. They have their own funding streams that are dedicated to specific purposes. The budgets are under the approval and control of the board, but we get direction from somebody else that tells us what we're really supposed to be accomplishing with those. The general fund portion of this $392 million budget is just $73 million. That is to pay for all of central service departments, considerable number of public protection departments, such as our public defender and animal shelter, other various things in the public protection area. It also includes our contingency reserve, which, as I stated, was $6 million, and our transfers out to the non-general fund departments, which is a little over $33 million. So basically 45% of our general fund budget goes to support non-general fund departments, and those are public safety, health and human services agency, county fire, library. We got here today basically recommending a status quo budget because we adhere to very strong budget principles. I think I've heard you mention before that some of your counterparts and other counties have actually asked for copies of our budget principles. We've adhered to those now for quite a few years, and they really give us a framework to follow as we go to build our budget. Just recently, we went through an extensive review process with Standard & Poor's where they were rating the county with regards to our bonded indebtedness. I'm very pleased to tell you that they gave us, again, a strong capital A long-term rating with a stable outlook. And in their report, they said this was due to the county's strong and stable financial position, good financial management, as demonstrated by the maintenance of balanced operations and low direct debt. So we've been recognized, again, in agencies outside of our direct county here. I'd like to call to your attention some items of interest in the recommended budget. It's a large document, so just a couple of things here that I think would be of interest to you. In capital projects, as I mentioned, we do have a $15 million juvenile rehabilitation facility. They've already broken ground. It's kind of exciting. Julie Hope passes on to us pictures of that project as it's progressing, so I'm enjoying keeping abreast of that. In land building and improvements, we have just under $2 million for various remodel projects, and that's real important because we have a lot of aging assets, and it gives us an opportunity to take good care of those buildings. There's about $500,000 that's going to be put into the Public Works building to remodel the roads area. The Reading Veterans Hall needs a new roof, $75,000. And renovations to the mental health building is just $1.35 million. In central services, the A87, you probably hear about that. Departments might grumble about it, actually. But it's an opportunity to spread the cost of central government to benefiting departments. When we moved into this building, one of the components of A87 is to charge departments for their building use. The cost for this building was so much greater than where we had been in the old courthouse or in various leased spaces, that the decision was made to give departments a rebate on the building use portion of this building. As a result, we've been foregoing about $2 million every year of revenue that could be recouped back to the general fund. Starting in this year, we're recommending a gradual phase out. Originally I have it scheduled to be phased out over 10 years. We may have to readdress that because it directly influences or has an impact on the rates for information technology that they pass on to departments. My hope was that as the economy recovered, we would all have more resources available to help defray that gradual increase in the cost for this building. If that doesn't come to pass, we'll address it again every year and maybe make it a longer phase out, maybe have to go to 15 years or 20 years. But it will bring back $2 million to the general fund over time, which we all know the majority of that, 45% of that goes back out to actually help the benefiting department. So just wanted to call that to your attention. The trial courts budget unit, again this year we're including just under $1 million to use in the event that we need to relocate from the public safety building. I'm sure you're aware that the Administrative Office of the Court purchased that building from the county, and they also purchased the surrounding properties to site a new courthouse facility. There is a snag in their funding for their courthouse, so we actually don't have to vacate the building until December of 2013. But I just felt it was prudent to continue to keep this money in there. It gives us an opportunity to be working on finding some alternative location for the sheriff and the probation department. One good thing with when the completion of the juvenile rehabilitation facility is over, probation admin will be moving in to that facility, so it takes a little bit of the pressure off there. We also now have to pay the costs for court facility operations and maintenance. It's about $1.2 million out of that budget unit. This budget unit used to primarily be used just to recognize revenue from court fines and fees, and then we paid our court maintenance of effort out of this account. So now there's various different things that are going on in that budget unit. One thing that you will see is our fines and fee revenue continues to go down because people just don't have the money on the day that they're seen before a judge. They don't have any money for forthwith payments, and so they end up going into accounts receivable, and the court does have a very strong court collections program to try and get that money. It's kind of difficult, though, when you might have something that has a base fine of $100, but the fine that you actually end up paying is about $500, because they've added on a whole cadre of fees on top of the fine, and those fees are used for things like trying to build new courthouses. So there's been a lot of things in the press recently about the fact that there's so much outstanding debt, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that fees are not really as reasonable as they used to be. In public safety general revenue, this is it's a budget unit that falls within the public safety fund. And times when we have excess or surplus public safety augmentation revenue, or the Prop 172, you probably hear it called, when the receipts come in excess of what we have budgeted, it's recognized in this budget unit. This budget unit also recognizes any interest earnings to the fund. And in the past, we haven't had it in the last couple of years, but in the past, this fund would oftentimes dip into negative cash, and any interest expense was also recognized in this budget unit. This year, our receipts for 172 are pretty strong. I believe we're going to end the year with a surplus again, and in accordance with a plan that the board approved last year, we will be using 1/2 of any surplus to continue to pay down the debt from a loan from the general reserve to public safety. It was in 2009-10 when those receipts came in $2 million below what was budgeted. So things are looking good in Prop 172 this year. I have recommended for this, just starting this year, that when the receipts come in, that we factor in a 5% contingency for within the public safety fund from 172 receipts. And there's kind of a twofold reason for that. One is this revenue is volatile. We can be like we are now with everything looking great, and then you have 4 or 5 months of just abysmal receipts, or they might reallocate the state receipts and our pro rata share goes down. So one is to have a reserve in the event that the receipts don't come in as planned, and then we don't need to reduce the budgets for the public safety departments. The other one is to start to build a reserve for those things that we know are coming. There's going to be added costs for running the new juvenile rehabilitation facility. If we add jail beds in whatever capacity that might end up being, either opening the floor of the new jail or building a new jail, or whatever we need to do to address the jail bed needs, that we know those things are coming. So I'd like to be able to say that we have this reserve that's building up, and it's in the public safety fund. It would come back to the board. It would be at your discretion how that money would be allocated in the current year or any future year. I'm going to talk about a few of the other ones who are using fund balance. We did adopt a policy for fund balance. We are working with departments, and we're actually, between our office and the auditor's office, departments need to use their fund balance that they have available before coming to the general fund, unless there's a minimum maintenance of effort that we have to comply with. And resource management, that's building planning and environmental health. In the aggregate, they are going to be using just over $1 million in fund balance this year. In addition to that, the planning department is receiving an allocation again to work on the general plan. That's $250,000. And we have that kind of on a fee-for-service basis. If they have expenses that can go towards the money that we've appropriated for the general plan update, we do journal entry and we give them the money. It's not an automatic transfer to the planning department. Mental Health Services Act, they're going to be using $3.7 million of fund balance this year, including using 100% of their prudent reserve. This has been approved by the state. An important part of their budget this year, and I would just like to mention it, is that it includes a county-operated crisis stabilization service, transferring that to a contracted provider. And in 2011, they issued an RFP. They've had response to that, and negotiations are currently in process. Mental Health Services Act and mental health funding this year have been really impacted by the new realignment. And at the state level, MHSA continues to be a target for budget solutions. The governor recommended using the money that had been collected from a particular non-discretionary source and using it to help with the state budget crisis. So things aren't looking good in the Mental Health and Mental Health Services Act. Mental health itself, realignment 211 causes significant shift in funding from mental health services. And the state's assumption is that the voters are going to approve a tax initiative in November, and then all the money that is needed in order to assist with mental health is going to be come from this new tax initiative. It's going to be for realignment. Whatever the outcome, whether that initiative passes or not, funding is really vulnerable for mental health. And it's at a time when our use of inpatient hospitalization and treatment continues to escalate. So it's certainly something that I'm sure that the Health and Human Services Agency will be bringing to your attention throughout the year. Public health has had a real steep decline in the revenue that they receive from the 1991 realignment. Since the, what are we calling it, the Great Recession, and every year I say what's so great about it, they've lost, not received, their revenue has gone down about $18 million in the cumulative effect throughout this Great Recession, and that's money that went to fund, important programs. So they've worked really hard to maintain cost controls. They are using about $600,000, a little over that, in fund balance for this year, and they continue to try and provide the critical public health services in this difficult time. Social services is going to be using about $3.1 million in fund balance. And in their budget proposal, they have asked to extend the sunset date of some positions that were added last year to help deal with caseload growth. Again, we're in this difficult time where a lot of people need us. They need our services. We had added 17 eligibility workers and 2 eligibility supervisors to sunset date the end of this month, June 2012. We're going to ask to extend that to June 2013. And they've also included cost to establish a new customer service center or a call center. Veteran Services, the Veteran Service Office is a general fund department. Your Veteran Service Officer asked to include one additional Veteran Service representative to help with the over 20,000 veterans and their dependents who are seeking services. And the net county cost for the Veteran Service Officer office is going up about $31,000. The Farm Advisor is also in the general fund. A couple of years ago, when we eliminated all the vacant positions, they lost a position. They've been trying to utilize extra help for about 3 years now. There's a lot of recruitment. You can't use extra help in the long term. There's a lot of training issues. It ends up with overtime for the one remaining staff. So our budget does include recommending adding a typist clerk 2 back to the Farm Advisor. And they've done their best to control costs that they could. They did eliminate their extra help, thinking that they'll get this person recruited and on board, but their net county cost will increase a little over $20,000. And the Veterans Halls, I know I mentioned that the roof on the Reading Veterans Hall needs to be replaced. We try to recoup some money from the use of the Veterans Hall by renting it out to private parties. It really doesn't result in very much money, if we're lucky, maybe $4,000 a year. They are valuable assets, and we do recommend taking care of them. We have made a lot of improvements in the veterans halls, mostly, notably for ADA improvements in all of the halls. In addition to the roof at the Reading Hall, the hardwood floor at Fall River Mills will also be refinished. And the net county cost for this budget is increasing a little over $100,000. Wish I could say that we could recoup that from the, private parties, but it's a general fund expense. I know you're wondering when I'm going to be quiet, but I'm almost done. County Fire will be using almost $750,000 in fund balance. Their appropriations declined by about 10%, but that's because their budget included fewer capital assets this year. It wasn't that the CAO or the CEO asked to cut their budget. It's that they had fewer big pieces of equipment. This year they've asked for one new fire engine for Centerville Volunteer Fire Company and one used fire engine for Old Station and 10 self-contained breathing apparatus replacement units. County Fire, if you look at the tables, you'll see that their county general fund contributions have been held static ever since the Great Recession, when we cut back everybody to a certain level. We've held them pretty static for the last 3 years. I did note when I look back through in their fund balance, though, their fund balance has also stayed pretty stable during that time. And in fact, with the budget that is being proposed, their fund balance at the end of June of next year, June 2013, should be approximately $1.7 million. The county workforce, we are adding some new staff, but there's also some reductions there. The net increase in the county workforce is 7 full-time equivalents. We'll be and starting the year with 1,837.5 FTEs. And the new positions, there's 5 new positions in probation and 10 in the sheriff's budget units, and they are to assist with the ramp up to the realignment 2011 or the AB 109 programs. And then there's 49 positions that we're asking to advance the sunset date to June of 2013, because we're also including in this all of the positions that were added for AB 109, because we're still ramping up to AB 109. So those 49 positions, 31 of them are in AB 109 programs and 18 are in social services. And finally, financing. The recommended appropriations for the general fund are $73 million, as I mentioned before, and that's offset by revenue of about $61 million. So we have a structural imbalance of about $12 million. We have fund balance carryover of about $11 million. And how does that come about? That comes about because we have this culture, we now have a culture of saving in the county. Departments are encouraged and they are not penalized for underspending in a year, that those monies can then go forward to help pay for the budget for the next year. And I really have seen a marked difference in this in attitude and in behavior by having this be part of our budget principles. We didn't use the contingency reserve at all, and then the rest of it was primarily from underspending within the general fund departments. We'll end up using, slightly under $1 million in general purpose fund balance, which is pretty phenomenal, I think, when you consider the state of affairs and the fact that we have not recovered in any way, shape, or form, and in fact our property tax continues to go down. Really the only thing I've seen an increase in, or kind of a stabilization in, is in sales tax. We strictly adhere to the budget principles. I thank you every year, mid-year, we ask you to adopt those, and it gives us that strong framework to follow as we start to meet with our departments. And as usual, I would like to thank all of our department heads and their fiscal staff and all of their staff for being willing to it's a big struggle. to balance service delivery. As I said in the beginning, this budget is all about providing service to the citizens here in Shasta County. And so I'd just like to thank them for that. And this, I promise, this concludes my remarks. And unless you have any questions of me, I'd like to ask the Deputy Assessor Recorder to come up and talk to us about our property valuations.
Any questions from the board at this time?
We'll have another opportunity
Okay.
for questions. So what we'd like to do is ask the Deputy Assessor to come up after her conclusion, then I will share some information and some data too. We could open it up for the public hearing and then open it up to questions from the board, if that's all right.
That'd be fine. Thank you, Ms. Phelan.
Okay. Kathy?
Ms. Scott?
Good afternoon, Chairman Modi, members of the board, Mr. Lees. I just have some tidbits here from the assessor's office related to the property tax roll for next year. As you're aware, since '09, our property tax roll has been declining. Going into '09, we lost 2.14%, another 5.56 going into 10, and 3.48 going into 11. We're still seeing a decline in values. We're seeing a little bit of everything this year, though. In some areas, we're actually seeing values hold their own. So the value on the Prop 8 roll for last year will be the same this year. But in a few areas, we're seeing some small increases, which is hopeful, positive. But we're also seeing areas where we're getting a 10% to 20% reduction from last year to this year. Really depends on the type of property and the location of the property. The index for the 2012 year is 2%, so any properties that have not been put into the Prop 8 status, value reduction because their factored base year value exceeds current market, every value that's less than current market value will get that 2% inflation factor that the state requires. Currently, we are working on our Prop 8s. We've enrolled over 20,000 so far. Last year, we had over 26,000 enrolled, and we are anticipating as many as 30,000 this year. Overall, we're estimating at this time, and this is a real tricky thing to do because we haven't completed the work yet, but we are anticipating somewhere between a 2% and a 3% reduction again for the 2012 roll. We are seeing some increases so far this year in the amount of recorded deeds. Documents are up 8.8% through the end of May of 12 as opposed to 11 for the same time frame. And a little more in deeds and a little less in foreclosures. So that may be a positive sign as well. Do you have any questions of me regarding the upcoming roll? When is the economy going to turn around? We don't know.
We keep thinking year to year, don't we? And it just keeps going.
Yes, and typically, I imagine you all know that we kind of follow the Bay Area and the LA area, and we're hearing some more promising news from some of those other counties that they're hoping to not see quite so much of a decline for this year. So as we see more of them come into a positive, then we can expect that we're going to follow suit soon. But we see that on the up and on the down. We're always a little behind. So, any other questions?
I don't think so. Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
It would not be a budget presentation if I didn't talk a little bit about the impacts of the state, and then I wanted to highlight a couple of the reasons in BB's presentation that we're doing what we're doing. I understand that we've got a state deficit, again, of about $15 to $16 billion, depending who you listen to. $9 billion of that is going to be made up with the proposition that's being flown in November of this year. That's going to be through increased taxes and some other things. Now, there's already been, the Legislative Analyst's Office have already said that even if the proposition goes through and passes and there's higher taxes for everyone, that it's only going to make up about $7 billion, not $9 billion. And so there'll still be a shortage. But you're going to see coming out of Sacramento here in the next week or so, and it will be probably within 2 weeks, the legislators sending a budget to the governor's office that will be balanced. But it will be balanced with the fact that November proposition will pass and some of these other things that they're assuming will take place. So the reason I point that out is there's still significant risk to counties, because if, number one, the proposition doesn't go through, and it's not a statement of whether to vote or not, it is, or if it doesn't come in at the same level that they were predicting. Remember, part of this budget was based on whether Facebook was going to be successful or not and how much money that would bring in. And so, on the state level. So there's some significant gaps in the budget that will be going to the state here shortly, and we need to be sensitive to that. Now, the reason I bring that up and how it relates to us, you heard Ms. Palin talk a little bit about increasing the contingency reserve, and originally the intent was to increase that as we thought about the potential for special elections as having to do with different state offices and federal offices. The reality, and those elections, there was no process to have reimbursement by the state at this time. But the other part of that contingency reserve is because of what's going on with the state. Because remember, this whole realignment 109 thing is funded on the fact that this November proposition goes through. And so I think this is the time when we need to make sure that we have a strong contingency reserve. And so it's for more than just elections, it's for all kinds of reasons that it's in there. And so I think that's a significant step. Don't take for granted, and I guess don't underestimate the strong work that your department heads have done to keep Shasta County on track financially. And when I say departments, I'm also including all the employees that participate. Just last week, Supervisor Haas and I heard how the banks literally foreclosed on the City Hall in Stockton. And now we've heard this week that they will be announcing their bankruptcy. I mean, that is significant, and they're not the only one. We heard that there's about 20 other cities that are lined up to have significant problems where they're on the potential of going bankrupt. We know that we've got counties around us in the same situation. And yet what you heard here with Shasta County is that we have just gone through the review where we've got one of the strongest bond ratings we've ever had, which is a strong, solid A bond rating. Now, what difference does it make if you're not going to use it for something? Well, we're planning on using it for something. It makes a difference, number one, to let you know that we're on solid foundation, financial foundation. But the other thing is it gives us a potential to refinance some of the debt that we have at significantly, probably all-time historic interest rates that will also save money. This Board of Supervisors found it prudent to refinance the courthouse bonds that had been in place for 20 years. And we're saving annually, we're saving significant dollars there. Well, we will be coming to you again within the next few weeks on another option to, again, reduce costs. So we're not sitting back watching what's happening. We're continuing to watch these opportunities. When you look at, there's statistics that are out there that really places debt ratio per capita, and Shasta County is one of the lowest debt ratio per capita of any other county. And then there's some that are just huge, that above 60%, that are just so significant, and we're in the teens. So we are, thanks to the prudent, your prudent watchful eye, we've been able to stay and remain on firm financial footing. The other thing I want to just briefly talk about the couple positions that we added. We talked a little bit about the farm advisor, just basic, and I don't want to put a spotlight on that, and a little bit about veterans, because one could ask, is this the time to be adding positions? And if I could take you back to a couple months ago and let you know what my kind of big vision goal is, that if there's going to be regionalization, and that's a terrible word for some, but that if there's going to be any type of efficiencies gained by putting resources together, I want Shasta County to be that hub. And we have done that, as you've heard me say, in a couple areas. Housing Authority, one of them. Child Support Services is another one. Now we're looking at some other areas. And as a matter of fact, tomorrow I'll be meeting with all the Northern County CAOs, and we are looking at actually some other areas Veterans Office being potential for one of them, as well as farm advisors. So there are things that are positioning ourselves, not to mention it's a significant investment for us to make when we're bringing in, $100 million in federal veteran benefits to our people here. And that's what I guess I want to close on, is that, we're talking all day here. We're talking about money, 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 money. But Ms. Palin started this conversation with, it's about the people we serve. And we can never lose sight of that, because when we're talking about saving money, we are absolutely talking about making a difference in the people's lives that we're responsible for. And that's why we're here. That's what it's all about. And so we get caught up in the mechanics of the dollars saved, but it's what those dollars saved represent. And it means that we can continue to fund departments that provide services to these people to helpfully make a difference in their lives. And it's exactly what we're trying to do with the 109 and trying to fix some of these bad boys and girls. And so I just want to have us remain focused on that also. With that, if you'd like to open it up for the public hearing, we could do that, and then we'll entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Lees. Before I do that, is there any questions of Mr. Lees at this time? Seeing none, then we will open the public hearing. Anyone wants to speak to the budget as presented so far? Close the public hearing.
This would be the time for any questions
Yes.
of Ms. Palin, not me.
Who's your boss?
Mr. Keough.
Thank you, Chairman Modi. Ms. Palin, congratulations on an outstanding job. I mean, this is really solid, professional work, and we all appreciate it. How about a word or two on what we're doing in GASB 45? And that is listed on page 16 of your introductory remarks, about in the middle.
Ms. Palin, may I have permission to kind of respond on a high level answer to that question?
Yes, Mr. Lees.
Great question, and we can talk about some numbers there, but I want to remind the board on that, we were kind of history setting here in Shasta County as it relates to the state. If you recall, there was some discussion about how to do the finance. Do you put all the dollars in one bucket? How heavy is the risk? And we actually, working directly with the auditor's office, who have been significant help in putting together this budget, by the way, and her staff, Ms. Ragnell. We actually were kind of history setting county in that we split up our investment in the GASB 45. So not only do we start taking care of our future debt so our kids don't have to pay it, but we've actually kind of not put all of our eggs in one basket. Now, people were eyeing that curiously and didn't know what exactly was going to happen. Since then, in fact, I just got a note yesterday, another city has done the exact same thing. So there's been many municipalities that have followed our suit, as it relates to diversifying a little bit while still taking care of those GASB 45 responsibilities. And I just wanted to remind us of how trend-setting this Shasta County Board is.
Great. So,
To supplement the remarks that Mr. Lees has made, perhaps you could tell us how much money we've set aside in that, and what is GASB 45?
GASB 45 required governmental agencies to record the future costs for other post-employment benefits, primarily for health insurance for retirees. Most agencies continue at that time, and most are still continuing to account for it on a pay-as-you-go basis. So whatever it costs for us to pay for our retiree health, we record it at the time that it's paid, not at the time that it's earned. So in GASB 45, we were required to have an actuarial in order to find out what our long-term responsibility or debt was for our other post-employment benefits. The latest, we're currently working on an update to the actuarial, and I think that will be out probably here in a month. Just wanted to make sure that that's accurate. But the latest report that we have as of June 30th, 2011, our unfunded liability is $140.9 million. When we opened up our OPEB trusts, the two different trusts, we funded each of them with $6 million. One to CalPERS, which gives you the benefit of being with the big organization, but it doesn't give you any ability to manage how you want your money saved and invested for you, and the other one was with PARS. As of June 30th, 2011, we had on deposit just under $20 million in those two trusts. So in addition to that, we instituted a 1% charge as a percent of payroll at the same time, and we use that. We split it every year, half and half, between PERS and PARS, so that we're trying to get ahead of it. It's not something that we can quickly fund, because if we did so, it would be to detriment of the services that we need to provide right now. So we have sort of a blended plan, the pay-as-you-go, and we're also paying towards it. So I'm very confident that we're on the right track there.
And if I may add, understand, just to show you, just to kind of keep things in perspective, you're talking about a commitment or a liability to the LA School District of $1.3 billion. You're talking about a state liability they have yet to address yet of $140 billion. And so, I mean, it's significant dollars that municipalities, and most, because legally they don't have to fund them, they have to report them, but they don't have to fund them. Most are just trying to push it off and not take care of it until times are better, if that ever happens. But we've been a little more proactive and are kind of just working our way through to make sure that at some point we'll have it covered.
Chairman Modi, I have a series of questions, but why don't I ask two more, and then I'll yield to my colleagues, if that's agreeable?
Could I chime in a little on this?
Sure.
I met Mike Graves, the one that sold us to PARS down in CSAC last week, and he said to say hello to all of you. He'd had a heart attack this last year, but he came out of it good and is doing well. So I just wanted to tell you that.
I just wanted to ask one question along with that same line. You basically, you said we started with 12 million. We're just about 20 million now. And obviously some of that's growth, but how much of that is additional money that we put in?
I believe that we put in around $700,000 a year, and we've put that in 2 years now. Yeah. So about 1.4 million of that was what we collected as a percent of payroll, and the rest is from investment earnings.
Yeah, so that's 6 million
Significant,
plus
yeah.
dollars in investment
Yeah.
dollars.
I
made.
think we did this at an opportune time.
Sure did.
Yeah, it's close to 50% growth on your investment. That's huge.
Yeah.
Mr. Keel.
Thank you, Mr. Modi. I refer you to page 46 of your budget summary. Under pending issues, in the middle of the paragraph indicates, and this is for the auditor controller, Fund 0060, indicates the recovery of costs through the cost plan is reduced by the board's decision not to charge special districts for the auditor's costs, which reduces the auditor's recovery by $190,251. My question is there any interest in revisiting that board decision? Maybe I ought to ask the board members or Mr. Lees.
Ask the board members.
Certainly that is an option that the board can undertake, and what you're asking for, we do have the ability in some areas for special districts to charge them some additional administrative costs. The problem with that is you're talking about something to take into consideration as you're deciding this, and it doesn't have to be decided today, but something to take into consideration is the fact that you're dealing with a lot of special districts that are very small cemetery districts and smaller water districts and things like that. Probably water districts not a good example, but other smaller districts out there that are just hanging on by the skin of their teeth, and it would be difficult for them to pick up additional fees at this time. Now, certainly, the argument on the other side is, but couldn't we be hiring more deputies and things like that? There's probably not enough money there to do that, whereas it might not turn around our ship. It could certainly sink theirs.
Is the 190 figure, is that an annual figure? Okay, so if the board at some point in the future wanted to entertain the idea of looking at this, we could look at a partial recovery of A87 cost, or a weighted recovery, something like that. Okay.
Maybe a weighted one is not a bad idea.
A question, when did we, do you know when we implemented the policy not to do, how long has it been in place?
The late 1990s.
Okay, thank you.
I refer you to page 67 of the summary. And this is the county clerk's registrar of voters section. Mention is made of the possibility of a second special election, vacancy election. What's approximate cost on something like that? Because we will absorb that cost at the local level, is that correct?
Do you want to come up? I'll ask Kathy Darling to.
I know she'll give us a good deal.
Today especially.
Yeah.
We're all a little sleep deprived over in my office. I'm sorry, Kathy Darling-Allen, Shasta County Clerk and Registrar of Voters. The cost of elections could be in the $400,000 range. We're talking about special vacancy elections, so it'd be a single issue on the ballot. If Mr. LaMalfa is successful in his bid for Congress, then his seat would be
Yeah.
Larry shaking his head.
Yeah, actually, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but I don't know if that example exists today, because LaMalfa will no longer be our senator if he goes to.
Right, so if
It's
he is.
Ted Gaines, though.
If he's successful, well, redistricting adds an additional layer of complexity to all of this. Every 10 years when we redistrict the state, there's a gentleman's agreement in Sacramento that the folks who are elected to a particular district will continue to represent those same people that elected them. So we would actually participate in the vacancy election, I believe, for Senate District 4, even though we would have a new, anyway, so it's complicated.
Well, I think it's a gentleman's agreement that maybe we won't be so gentlemen.
Well, I know I'm not the one who's shaking hands on that one, so.
Well, this is one thing I was going to mention, because it talks about the assembly in here, and that's taken care of, so.
Potentially, right. That may be true. There's some debate still about that,
I
yeah,
kind of think that both are taken care of, but maybe there's.
right. Hard to say.
Good point, didn't mean to.
Good to be safe,
Yes,
safe
yeah,
though.
yeah. And when we put this information together, I'm sorry to interrupt, our best guess was that,
Right.
Obviously yesterday changed the picture for a lot of things, so.
But typically, an all-county election could be anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000. Is
Correct,
that safe?
correct, yes.
And Ms. Ellen, then, that's not a recoverable cost from the state?
Not currently. There was in the past the potential for reimbursement by the state. That law has had repeated sunset provisions, and it was not reauthorized a couple of years ago.
So we absorb those costs on a local level?
We would, correct.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield to my colleagues.
Thank you. Mr. Hawes?
Well, that was the one thing I was going to bring up, but I also wanted to bring up something that Mr. Lees and I discussed with a gentleman last week about this building. We could save a lot of money in a refinance situation. So I want you all to know that he's always thinking of ways to make it better, and it's already so good that, I tell you, it's just awesome to go somewhere with him and watch him operate, especially with the governor, everybody. He does an excellent job.
Thanks.
But that's a good thought, isn't it?
Thank you.
But everyone has done a wonderful job with this budget too, believe me, under his direction and ours. We'll take a little bit of the credit.
My board's not lighting up, Mr. Kehoe. Perhaps you'd like to continue.
Thank you. I refer then to page 94 of the budget summary. This is the tobacco settlement grants. Budget Unit 174. indication is that the distribution of this funding in recent memory has been reduced by, or declining by 22%. Our current allocation formula is 10% to the Shasta Community Health Center, 90% to debt retirement on this building.
Yes, sir.
And so, for the first time, I guess, this year, we're having to augment the retirement of debt on this building by $540,000, approximately $540,000. So what does the future portend? Or is that contribution from the general fund going to increase over the years in your judgment?
Well, it will fluctuate every year depending on how much revenue we receive from the master settlement agreement with the cigarette companies. So if you think about, I like to call these sin taxes. So as people get the message and they stop smoking, then our collection of tobacco tax from the settlement will go down. So you're right, it could very well be that in years where our revenue does not, if it continues to decline because people's behavior is doing what we're trying to tell them to do, then it will be an impact on the general fund. Because we will have less money from tobacco settlement.
And
pay
so, but to answer your question directly, as she just did with the last statement, yes, it will. We hope so. And I know that may sound bad, but, remember the whole goal here is to keep people healthier. And if less product is being bought and less people are smoking and they're remaining healthier, then that actually curbs costs other places too, with Health and Human Services and things like that. And I know that's a little visionary, but your perception is absolutely correct that the funding mechanism, there's thought with this new proposition coming in November of adding another $1 a pack or whatever it is, that might even drive the use down a little bit just because the cost is becoming too prohibitive. But
I only mention this to you and my colleagues from this perspective. When we went ahead and dedicated the tobacco settlement grant funding to retire debt on this building, the assumption was that would take care of it. Well, over the years now, we're starting with this year, we're having to supplement that by almost $500,000, and that'll increase in the future. So we need to be very judicious when we take on capital projects. My final question is having to do with debt service on page 333 of the summary. And you've spoken a little bit about this, Mr. Lees and Ms. Palin, and then you've provided us this supplemental sheet, Shasta County long-term debt. And so the principal on the debt right now is approximately, I'm going to round these up, $45 million. The interest on the debt is $26 million for an aggregate of $71 million. And the debt service this year, or the coming year here, is $4 million. So what are your thoughts on that ratio between the total debt that we have and the debt service? Is that a favorable ratio? I think it is, but I'd like you to address it.
I think it is. I think Standard & Poor's thought that it was. I know Mr. Lees had some statistics about our debt ratio, our per capita debt ratio, and how it's the lowest in the state, I believe.
yeah, it's certainly we are one of the lowest counties, and it fluctuates a little bit. We are between 15 and 16 percentage, 15 or 16% per capita, and we had counties, and I think it was Fresno, well, I better not say it. We have counties that are 50, 60%. And more and higher, and so we are in a very favorable position as it relates to that. But your point is well taken, especially on the thought as we tend to fund new capital projects, to certainly be aware that sometimes our funding mechanisms change also, and
Right.
we need to, yeah, I think that's well put.
You know, that's one of the reasons why we recommended, and in fact, we did, refund the bonds on the courthouse, because the dedicated funding stream for that debt service is from court fines and fees, and we're seeing less recovery. I mean, there's a lot of money owed, but we're not necessarily seeing all of that materialize. And it really helped. It lowered the annual debt service enough that I don't have that fear that we're not going to recover enough to pay that. The Justice Center, it retires actually in 2015.
Okay.
And a portion of that is paid for with court fines and fees as well, so.
One final question, Mr. Modi.
Go ahead, Ms. Keel.
Thank you. This is on page 86 of the budget summary, juvenile hall construction. And again, we're talking about being reimbursed ex post facto, and in a sense, we're being the banker of the state of California. But we do mention in this report about cost overruns and operating expenses. And I guess we've accounted for that in previous board actions, but are there any other anticipated cost overruns on this project?
I think if it's, I'd like to ask Pat Minturn to answer that.
And perhaps while he's coming up, could you, one question I had earlier, how many years of debt service are left on this building?
This building retires in 2033.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Pat Minturn, Public Works Director. The Juvenile Hall project, you've been provided with photographs. You see the contractor is diligently going at the site, preparing the site. Often, most of the liability is before we get out of the ground, so to speak. Most of the problems come to light from the foundation down. We've had very good progress with Roeblen. The board will recall the board set aside $1 million as a contingency for unforeseen issues, and we have not seen anything to date that would significantly scratch that contingency. Now, as we move into the project, things will inevitably arise, but so far the prognosis is very good.
Thank you, Mr. Minturn.
Now, Mr. Minturn spoke to the capital aspect
Right.
as it relates to the investment. The other part of your question would relate to ongoing operational costs. We do our best to determine what those costs are going to be, but yeah, there could be some fluctuation there also that we may have to make adjustments for. But we've got a range that we are budgeting for that we think we're going to be within.
And then, as far as the banker portion of your comment, I heard Ms. Hope say that the first payment has been approved, and was that timely? Yeah, it was a timely approval for the first payment on the construction.
Okay.
That's just
So
good news.
when we talk about operating expenses, and we've increased that from 413,000 to 600,000, and you're taking that into consideration how we're going to cover these, correct?
Correct, and we have a contingency there in
Okay.
that, yes.
Thank you. All right. Final observation. Final observation, Ms. Payman. In looking at these reports, I really appreciate the way you and your staff have this laid out. You've got the project description, you've got the budget requests, you've got the summary of recommendations, and it's really helpful that you outline the pending issues and policy considerations for the board. That's very strong. And then department head concurrence on appeal. Really a good approach in my mind. Thank you.
Mr. Hawes.
Well, I just go back to this building. If we can refinance it and save $2 to $3 million, there's part of the problem taken care of, Supervisor Kehoe. So just good business, watching the times and grabbing the opportune time to do that. So that's what we're in the process, I think, of getting to. So
Supervisor Baugh.
Thank you, Chair Modi. I just want to add my thanks and admiration to that already expressed by Supervisor Kehoe for for a great budget presentation. To you, your staff, and every department literally that participates. I also just want to say to all the departments, thank you for your conservative nature, where you're watching dollars, and you have created the fund balances that we're able to carry over from year to year. It's government doing business very well for the people and considering things in a very practical matter. I appreciate that being one of the budget priorities. It is different from almost every other government that we hear about. No one is doing that. So it is a huge deal, and I hope that the community realizes the efforts that you're all putting into this. It's a big deal. I just wanted to draw out a couple more questions. You mentioned that we had 1,837.5 authorized positions, but on a typical basis, approximately how many are filled at any one time?
We usually have a 10% vacancy factor. The day that I ran, you know, any day you run a report, it might not be indicative of, you know, what the general thing is. It was about 16% vacancy factor the day that I ran it, but we typically have 10% of those are unfilled.
Thank you. And does any part of our budget depend upon the governor's request for additional taxes passing?
All of the AB 109, realignment 2011, public safety.
So are we saying that we won't get that money, or he's not sure if it's not guaranteed? What are you actually saying?
He is building in that, and for this go-round, we're talking about $6.2 million. He is building that into the budget to provide for us, Shasta County, and he is planning on taking that revenue from his proposition that passes in November. So the question is, if that does not pass, will we not get it then, or will the revenue be taken from somewhere else? And that has not been determined by the state yet.
So that part of our budget is at risk, and have you considered that?
Yes, we have, and the other part of that, because this is something that's pertaining to every county in the state.
Right.
The other part of that is, then does that mean that these bad boys and girls go back? Because, you know, they came here contingent, and it was almost like a funded mandate, unfunded mandate, or it was a funded mandate intent. So there's all kinds of discussion about that, and the governor is right in the middle of it. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just would add to that, it was discussed at CSAC here a few months ago, and I attended that meeting, and clearly what it will do is be back to the drawing table with the battle lines drawn between public safety and education to fight over the dollars again, just like they were 3 months ago. So.
Just last week, same thing, the governor sat right up in front of the whole board and said, you know, if that doesn't pass, here's his trigger cuts. That's what'll start happening. We don't know where they're all gonna come from, but there'll be a lot of them if it doesn't pass, so. Yeah.
And one way that the state continues their creative finance is to withhold and delay payments to counties. So that's
Which in one
Or the
area of
bank.
HHSA is $2 million, and you saw a very creative style of writing from one of HHSA people who said, you know, when can we expect to fill that gap or get that $2 million back? And it's, you know, till the end of time, probably.
Supervisor Hartman.
Thank you. I want to take the opportunity, my colleagues have already made similar comments, but Ms. Palin and Mr. Lees, you both talked about our strong budget principles that we've been living by as a county for a few years now. And I just want to thank you guys, all of our staff, all of our team, for sticking to those. And we should all be proud of where Shasta County is, the hard decisions and hard cuts that we've had to make, but are bringing us to days like today where we have hearings, and it's just kind of the way we live, and we can continue to move forward because of the decisions that have been made, and our county departments adhering to that. And I'm proud of you, and I want to thank all of you.
Supervisor Hawes.
Well, I say the same thing. I've done this year after year, and it just gets better. You're all doing a fantastic job. I'm just very disappointed in the voters of this county. You know, they trust us to take care of this budget every year, do all the things we do, and then yesterday, they didn't trust us, and they let us down. So it's going to cost somewhere in the future. There's no way we can keep doing all of this and not have any income. So I'm on the way out of this. I've only got 6 months left, so watch me say a few things between now. I don't have to worry about being reelected again. So I can say it again. I am very disappointed in the NIMBY movement that has moved to Shasta County, and I'm not afraid to say that, so.
You mean you've been watching what you've been saying all these years? I'm concerned then.
I think a bunch of you agree with me, but you don't dare say it.
I was trying to look on the positive side of
Yeah,
things.
well, it is positive all up to that, but that part they failed us. So I lost control.
I'm sensing that our budget hearing is about over.
We did a lot of work to get to that decision. We did.
You know, I don't want to belabor the point of my colleagues, but I do want to add to their comments. I am continually impressed by our employees here at Shasta County, not only the department heads, but as you mentioned, all your staff, all the people who've worked on these budgets, but also all your employees who are there where the rubber meets the road and follows through on what we give or don't give them to make this happen. And clearly, everybody is guarding the taxpayers' dollars very closely, and yet you're turning around and giving the best service you can give with what they're able to provide you to do that. And that is impressive continuously, and I think the public sometimes forgets that because they're concerned by other things, but they need to be reminded that you people are working very hard all the time to do the best with their dollars, and I do applaud you for that. So, I think the next portion is would be action. We had appeals, but we don't have any formal appeals. Do we have any outside agency requests for an appeal? No? So then we will move to item 7, which is the consent calendar approved by consensus, those budget units which have not been formally appealed and which have no major policy considerations or outstanding issues.
Move approval of the consent calendar?
Second. Nope. Give it to Linda.
Moved and seconded.
I'm sorry, Linda.
Mr. Haas.
There's 2 items that I need to recuse from, the Budget Unit 88, the Endangered Species Fund, and that's due to the other business that I'm in, and also Fund 9044 under the Shasta, because that, part of that property adjoins my property. Just the 2.
Very well.
So 285, I'm sorry, and the other one?
88. 188, is it? Is it no? I'll look here right quick.
Oh, 944, okay, thank you.
Do you have it, Mr.
285, I'm sorry. Number 285, the Endangered Species Fund. Well, it says in parentheses 188.
Okay,
188.
Okay.
all right, thank you.
As duly noted then. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Board of Supervisors will recess and convene as the Shasta County Water Agency. The Shasta County Board of Supervisors does not receive any compensation or stipend as a result of convening as the Shasta County Water Agency. We will
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Shasta County Water Agency will adjourn and convene as the Shasta County Air Pollution Control Board. The Shasta County Board of Supervisors does not receive any compensation or stipend as a result of convening as the Shasta County Air Pollution Control Board.
Move approval of the consent calendar?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The Shasta County Air Pollution Control Board will adjourn and convene as the successor agency to the Shasta County Redevelopment Agency. The Shasta County Board of Supervisors does not receive any compensation or stipend as a result of convening as the successor agency to the Shasta County Redevelopment Agency. Pleasure of the board.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
And then I'm out of the Shasta part of it. Somebody else better move that part.
Okay, we got a second from Mr., I think we have next to Mr. Bogg. We'll let Mr. Bogg do it. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The successor agency to Shasta County Redevelopment Agency will adjourn and convene as the Shasta County In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority. The Shasta County Board of Supervisors does not receive any compensation or stipend as a result of convening as the Shasta County In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority.
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The Shasta County In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority will adjourn and reconvene as the Shasta County Board of Supervisors. I don't think we need to continue our hearing. I think we're done. And we don't,
Well, yeah,
do we have anything there?
on 14, we do need you to direct the CEO to bring all of the budget resolutions to you to be adopted before the end of June.
Move approval.
Thank you. Second by Mr. Baugh. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I believe, Mr. Keough?
Mr. Modi, if it meets with your pleasure, could we request all the department heads to stand so we could show our appreciation for their sterling work, including Mr. Lees, of course, and Mr. Cruz, and the staff.
A job well done, thank you. And this meeting is adjourned.